All right. Changing things up again. Trying horizontal so that the image looks better. And I was told to maybe not be spinning my pens and playing with them because they apparently that noise picks up really well. And I'm realizing where my eyes naturally look right now, which is very uncentered, apparently. There. So we'll see how this works. But I think it's probably better. I have to get used to looking there, not there, where I want to look. That's me looking at me. That's me looking at the camera. We'll see what happens. I didn't have any idea what I was going to talk about today until about, what time is it? Till about 20 minutes ago, probably. And I'm like, I think I should talk about rest because today feels so full, but like not chaotic. It just feels full. I've been saying I feel flustered. You can have like a full day at like a concert or something, like a festival, not feel flustered. Everything's just fun and everywhere. But I feel like there's just too much for me to do today. And I think I'm gonna get it all done. I think. It just feels too full. Mondays often feel full to me. But, the first 2 weeks I did this didn't feel as full. And they weren't as full. I have a couple like deadlines, I guess. I was gonna say personal deadlines, but they involve other people, so they need to get done. And so I have to make a big dent in that today. Try to get emails and inbox to a manageable state. They're really not behind. I just haven't had a lot of time today to get to them. Back-to-back appointments all day. So, which is a great thing to have to sit with, is a full schedule. Especially for like work stuff, It's good to have a full workload, but assuming it's like a gainful workload, whether that's like financially or like developmentally, whatever it is, there's definitely like unuseful work, non-useful, whatever. But I've been thinking a lot about rest lately and what that looks like to do properly. I have a lot of perspectives on that from like a spiritual, religious perspective. And that doesn't make it easier necessarily. But the perspectives can change. There's a lot of different philosophies on rest and work. There's a lot of people who thrive a lot in like a grind set mentality, like 100 hours a week. I never sleep. Do all this work all the time. Don't think that's very healthy. I don't think there's a lot of data to back that. And not everything needs data, but if I'm speaking within my field, I think there's better research on rest than not rest. Probably a better way to say it. And there's always gonna be people who thrive with more intensity or less intensity, and there's subjectivity to work ethic and workload, all that. But at the end of the day, we have good research on resting. And I've been trying to figure out how much of rest is a privileged act or not. Because we have it nowadays, easier than any time in history, pretty much. And you got people who are living awful experiences right now. But I think as a collective, especially in the US, to the best I can understand, it's a pretty good time to live. So, all things considered, there's just a lot of unfinished thoughts on rest right now. Because you can still get stuff done if you're not resting. I mean, the slave trade still exists because people can just be worked to death. But it's like that piece, right? Like worked to death, and then we can be existentially worked to death So why people have regrets at the end of their life, feel like they worked in the wrong areas or put their efforts into the wrong areas. And that's also hard to reflect on too, because it's retrospective. Had you worked less, maybe you would have been less profitable and had a worse life. I don't know. I'm not really trying to talk about work in terms of financial gain, but just like keeping busy and the value of doing nothing. Like genuine nothing, because I feel like a lot of people, their definition of rest is unto being more productive and useful. I feel like a lot of people might say, I rest, I get my sleep, spend time reading, I recover, but it feels like it's always to work better, which I don't think is inherently wrong. It's good to rest to work better. But if it's not for any other reason, maybe, I don't know. I think it's useful to rest for the sake of resting and experiencing a break. The only thing on my mind is like, oh, I need to sleep so my workout's good tomorrow, or I'm not sore, or so that way, I don't have bags under my eyes, or I'm not stressed, or I can work better tomorrow. Versus, it's just good to sleep for a lot of reasons. It's good to be able to sit down and look at a tree just because it exists, just to rest and take a break. Man, there's a lot of unfinished thoughts here. I've been reflecting a lot, and I actually don't have a lot of conclusions. One conclusion is rest is good. I don't buy into any idea that the opposite is true. Rest is good. There's room for discussion about how much and what kind, and what really is rest. Scrolling on your phone for 4 hours on social media, it's probably not rest for most people. It might be restful for a couple minutes, but if it gets your cortisol going and you're just stressed out, probably would have been better for you to keep doing whatever productive task you were doing. So, I don't know. But I know rest is good. I feel really confident in that. It's also this it's a very big truism. Pretty much every belief system, with some exceptions, I guess, really values rest. And as much research as I can find supports rest as being beneficial. And again, I'm referring to willful rest, not just sleep, not just your boss gave you a break, but you just deciding, it's a Friday night, I'm just not going to do anything. Or I don't know what my evening looks like. Maybe I play a game. Maybe I hang out with friends. Maybe I sleep, go to bed early. Maybe I watch the sunset, Just unagendaed rest. If you asked me to give a definition of rest, I would probably flounder for one and then maybe change my mind next week. But I do think a large part of rest, maybe not every time, but a large part, is willfully not knowing what's coming next in a state of contentness. Not dissociation, not oh, this is so traumatic, I don't know what's going to happen, I'm just going to not think about it. Willfully not knowing what's going to happen next in a state of contentness. I think that's an element to it. Of resting. And that's also why I think the definition can change, because that can be very true in a conversation or at a party. And for someone else, that might be stressful. And so that's the subjective nature. Which is why I think when we speak into other people's lives around, oh, you're working too much, or oh, you're taking too many breaks, I think a lot of the times we're just speaking from our own perspectives. What we're really saying is, I wouldn't work that much. I wouldn't recommend taking those breaks like that. But speaking into someone else's experience and position is a lot harder. So, someone who knows me really well, which is not a lot of people, they're going to do a much better job at saying, like, Ryan, you're overworking or you're slacking, and actually being right. Where if I honestly reflected, I'd be like, yeah, you're right. It's really hard to know someone that way. Some people are really good at it though, but I think in general it's hard. So rest is important. Overworking is a real thing. But it also begs the question of, what to do and this is an area that I get stuck with rest, is I don't know how much of rest is privileged in terms of ability to do so. This is why I think a lot of my philosophy is more logotherapeutic and maybe Jungian in a sense, but I always go back to people who were in, concentration camps in Germany during World War II and the Holocaust. This is true of any concentration camp, current or past, in future. There's always people who are joyful, not happy, not excited to be there, but who can tap into a state of choosing joy, where they can say, no, I'm in spite of atrocity, I'm going to be content and I'm going to have joy. I'm going to look up at the sky if I am in a camp and appreciate the blueness of it. Look at the wall of my jail cell and appreciate that someone can build. This is not a dismissive. I think this is easy to misinterpret, but we know that people experience joy, and at no point in, I think, most of their experiences would they say, I'm so joyful, I just want to stay in this jail cell or in this camp. I don't think that's the case. And the reason I bring that up is because, if you're enslaved, or if you're in a prison cell and everything's done for you and you're beaten and told to do things, and you hear me saying, like, just make some time for rest, you should rest, that might be like a middle finger to you a little bit. So, there's an element of that that's, I think, true if you can get it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with addressing an ideal. I think everyone should be able to pay their bills. If you go out and you work hard, you should be given a good wage. And that's not saying if you go work hard, you'll just get it. I think there's a lot of bad situations. But I think if people are trying, a world that rewards that well enough, I think is good. So I think, people shouldn't have to struggle in certain ways, but we do. So when choice is taken away, like in a camp, like in a cell, all that self-help advice and research doesn't do a whole lot. It can still help, but so much of that's intrinsic. If my definition of rest is sitting beachside, if I live at like a beach house and I go out, my first 2 hours every morning, I look at the beach, I read a book, and that's how I rest. Well, the moment I lose that, then I no longer can rest, because my definition of rest was super external, completely external. I go out by the beach and read my book. Two things that I don't really have a lot of control over when you think about it. I do in those moments because of my situations and my circumstances. But in a jail cell, or in a place where I can't get a book or a beach or sunlight, what I've essentially done is set myself up for a definition of rest that's now impossible to obtain. So there's, I think there's more to that. How do we find inner peace under turmoil? That's why a lot of philosophies and religions thrive in a lot of, that's why I think a lot of like self-help stuff doesn't stand the test of time. I mean, most of those books are out of date in a couple of years. It's because there's not a lot that rings true cross-culturally or eternally, so to speak. I think those are two really important factors. And I talked about that last time, I think. Books that withstand the test of time That's important. A book that I could read and people in 40 different countries can read, of all different socioeconomic and cultural backgrounds, can read and say, that had a lot for me. That's really important. And it doesn't mean you can't write things for a certain time in a certain people group, not at all. But many topics, rest included, I feel like any direction on that really does have to withstand time and culture and circumstance, or I don't know, or it's only useful in that moment, and that can be okay. It's like if you say the meaning in life, your meaning in life is your family. I think it's an okay motivator, but what if your family disappears? Now you're meaningless. And I think a lot of people would say, yes, I am. I think there's a lot to say about rooting your rooting your meaningful experience in life into something intangible, ethereal, eternal, intrinsic, something that cannot be taken away. And that doesn't mean that as that comes out of us can't be expressed in the external, like family. It just means that the actual thing that provides meaning can't be taken away. But maybe the things that we have allowed to express that in our lives can be. That's why, like, a teacher, you can take a teacher out of a classroom, or, take their hands off, and now they can't write anymore. They can still teach, or take their tongue out. They still can, the thing that they value can still be internal, of I am someone who values pulling in information to the best that I can, offering it to other people. This is why so many motivational speakers, what's his name? I get it, Nick, I'm gonna butcher this, but Nick Vujicic, the dude with no limbs, motivational speaker guy. Really good example. He's got a lot of reason to be extrinsically unhappy, but isn't. That's why those people can be successful, people with tough backgrounds or hard life circumstances, because it's a different perspective. People assume they had to try harder to be happy and to be restful. It's not always true, though, but that's the assumption, because we put ourselves, that's, our perspective. If I was in that position, I would be a mess, so therefore that person must have also been a mess and figured it out. Or a really rich person who's depressed, and we say, oh, if I was wealthy, I wouldn't be sad. It's like, you don't know that, you're just projecting. Although I think most people would prefer to be sad with money than sad and broke. But point being, we project our current circumstance and our internal ideation onto whatever we see, and then we make the assumption on whether that's motivational or that's insulting or that's this and that, and we're out of touch, and a lot of things are. But yeah, so I think I'll probably have a lot of thoughts on rest over the coming weeks, whether I share them here or not. There's a book that I've been wanting to read that's called Rest by what's the name? Soo-Young Kim Park? I feel like I'm missing part of that name. It's a book. The book's called Rest. Usually I'm better with book titles and names, but every episode I've done of this, clearly not. That book's been interesting. I've been wanting to read it for a while, and I started it last week and got not very far. But that's helping me think a little bit more about this and reflect on it. What the proper intersections are between work and rest and all that stuff, man. So fascinating to me. And temperament is, and you put someone else in my exact same job, in my exact same schedule, in my exact same life, but their personality and temperament's different, they're going to handle it different. And that's, it's like trying to prescribe the exact right dose of medication for someone. It's like borderline impossible. So, not that I can prescribe. There's a lot of different medications and a lot of different dosages and a lot of different body types. Everyone's their own cocktail of experience and chemical and needs and struggles. It's so fascinating. both like encouraging and discouraging sometimes, depending on the perspective you choose to take. Yeah, this feels so scattered. But it's helpful because I actually, before recording this, would have thought I understood rest a little bit better, and I think the more I learn about it, the less I understand, which is super cliche, but not the more I learn, the less I know. I don't know if knowing and understanding. Now I'm in like a semantic definition issue. I feel like to know and to understand are different things. And I feel like the more I'm learning about this, the less I understand. Maybe. We'll see. Ask me in an hour if I have all the same thoughts as I do now, because this is very not put together. But that's where we're at. I'll probably leave it there today and just, I've given myself a lot to reflect on and think about. And I chose to primarily look at myself and not the camera because this feels weird. Don't know why I'm enjoying looking at myself in this picture. Normally I hate that on video. I think it feels like I'm talking to someone. But I look away a lot when I think, so I don't know. Anyway, I'm at the point of digression and tangent probably, so we're going to call it there. And I'm excited to see if this looks better horizontal. And if I talked loud enough, because there's an appointment happening next door, and I'm super self-conscious this entire 22 minutes on whether or not I can be heard. So in theory, I shouldn't be, because I do appointments in this room, but like I said, tangents and digression. I'm going to call it. So we'll see you next week.